Welcome to the Yapping Podcast. I'm your host, Rafa, and let's start yapping. As we wrap up week 6 of the NFL, we've already had one coach fired. And after watching what's happened this week, we should have another couple fired, or at least on the hot seat and the hot seat, like boiling, like the shit's on fire. Antonio Pierce of the Raiders turns out, at least looking at what we're seeing so far, looks like a terrible hire. At the time, he might have done good things with his defense to end the season, blah, 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 blah. He beat the Chiefs, they say. At the end of the day, this man's not an NFL head coach for this decade. Okay, that run the ball, play defense shit, go find that 20 years ago, buddy. So that he's in way over his head. Raider fans are starting to realize it, and they can keep blaming all the quarterbacks they want. Well, the first 2 games or 3 games of the season, Gardner Minshew was top 5 in every category. Yet they were, still struggling in reality to win games and score points, etc. Now they won 2 games. We don't know how, but they did. And the last couple of games, they've looked atrocious. I mean, the game today with the Steelers, I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched very little of it, to be honest with you. But judging by the score and from what we saw, I started watching on that play there near the end zone where he doesn't challenge. The play is clearly you need to challenge it. It's not a touchdown, but it's a lot closer than what they gave you. And you challenge it, and maybe you run something else. But at the end of the day, he's clearly in way over his head.
So, what do you say to the Raider fans who just had so much hype and so much almost arrogance? It was almost an arrogance from Raider fans when he got hired that they were going to be the successful program. I mean, what do you say to them at this point?
Well, I don't know if there was arrogance from the Raider fans, but most Raider fans, listen, all not all, not I'm just not gonna say Raider fans. All fanatics, especially NFL football fanatics, they all think like it is their time, right? And to be honest with you, I don't know any Panther fans, right? So maybe they don't believe that shit. The Dolphins fan believe it. Cowboys fans definitely fucking believe it. The Steeler fans as well. Every NFL fan base thinks this is their year, going all the time, and it's this is. But when you actually sit and you find the realistic fan, the realistic Raider fan, the realistic Cowboy fan, I don't know any of them, to be honest with you. I don't know if they exist on the Cowboys end, but I know some of the Raider fans, and they thought at the time it was a good hire because he did well with the defense to close the year. But you still had a quarterback issue. You went games where you could barely score. The game against, I think it was the Chiefs, he didn't throw a pass for what, 2 quarters, 2.5 quarters, 3 quarters, whatever it was. They still managed to win the game. But, how much were the Chiefs playing for at that point? And it was Christmas Day and blah, blah, blah. Listen, the Chiefs turned it up when they needed to. That's for another day. So the Raider fans, I think the realistic Raider fans are starting to regret this. But they're also regretting the offensive coordinator hire. Like, what did he do in Chicago that showed you that he could run another offense? Like, he couldn't do that, and you gave him a job. So it's like it starts in reality from the top with the Raiders. It starts with the general manager all the way down to the sideline. And Antonio Pierce, in my opinion, is not an NFL head coach. You saw it with the Raiders in Week 1. You saw he's just not. He's not NFL ready. Bottom line. And you just threw him out there because he had a couple of good weeks. Well, and I think they did that because the last time they did that, they didn't stick with the guy. And, the team liked him and blah, blah. And then this time Crosby advocated for him. And he did do very well with the defense to close the year. But at the end of the day, now we realize 6 games in that man is not an NFL head coach. He's really not. He went out and put AOC in there, and he proved that he's not it.
I just really hope that because at this point, let's say he doesn't turn around. Let's say it looks like he's going down the avenue of getting fired. I don't want to hear one line of "We need a Raider as our head coach." You don't need a Raider. You need a winner. I'm tired of hearing that line. It's over. Stop it.
Yeah,
Get a winning coach.
that being a Raider thing. What even is a fucking Raider at this point? Like, what is a Raider? That whole being a Raider shit. That's when all the guys that are Raider fans now that are 55, 60, 65 years old, that was a thing back then. Dude, there hasn't been a Raider or whatever the fuck. That's like not even a fucking thing anymore. Like you've literally accomplished not a damn thing. Absolutely nothing since you got your ass whooped in that Super Bowl against Gruden. Like that was the last time that team was basically a real contender and a real title contender. So the whole we need a Raider, that shit is long gone. Like the fans, most of the fans, there's probably like 90% of the fans are just fucking idiots. And that includes all fan bases, not just the Raiders. But to say, oh, this is the Raider way, that's not a fucking thing. It shouldn't be a thing. So, like the Patriots way, that shit was a thing because they were good. They would go to Super Bowls. And when Brady got hurt, Matt Castle came right in, Patriot way, 11-5. Like players talk about that shit. Players that have been there and have left, it's like, oh, you had to do shit the Patriot way, which is what in reality seems like the Bill Belichick way. But the Patriot way, the Raider way, that's not a fucking thing. It shouldn't be a thing. Hasn't been a thing for 35 fucking years. So, but we're speaking about Raider coaches getting fired. The next up on the list, we have to, and Cowboy fans need to sit down and really look at this. Your team is now 3-3. You're 0-3 at home, by the way, in 3 absolute ass whoopings. And I was at that Ravens game. The game ended 28-25. Did it ever feel that close? Not at all. The game was 28-6 to start the fourth quarter. It was 21-3 at halftime. It was just absolute dominance by the Ravens in that game. You were dominated 2 weeks before that against the Saints at home. You were absolutely demolished today by the Lions. I know Parsons didn't play. You had a couple defenders missing. Your offense scored 9 points. And so Jerry Jones now has signed CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott to max contracts. They both well deserved it. So you can't move from Dak. And I said last year, I thought it was one or the other. It was either Dak or McCarthy. And Jerry Jones can't fire himself. So who's next up? It has to be Mike McCarthy at this point. The team's 3-3. The leader in the division in the NFC East is Washington at 4-2. Philadelphia's 3-2, I think. So I mean, there's still plenty of time for the Cowboys, right? They're not in a division where the leaders, 5-1 or 5-0 or anything like that. There's plenty of time. The problem is that you have a bye this week, which will help you. Maybe Parsons comes back, which I don't think he will. Okay, I think you need to pay that man so then he can, maybe give an extra effort to get back on the field. But you have a bye this week, and then you go to San Francisco. And now, if they lose that game after the bye, and then sit at 3-4, and let's say the Eagles win a couple, now the Eagles will be sitting at 5-2, and the Eagles haven't played well by any means. I mean, that's the next coach that if that team loses 3 or 4, can also be on the fucking hot seat and out of there. But I think Mike McCarthy, after this week, has to be on the hot seat. 3-3, 0-3 at home. You had a tough one last week in Pittsburgh that you barely squeaked out. And you had to do it on fourth down. It was a great play by Dak and the rest of that offense to actually pull it off. So, and you struggled at New York. And with the exception of the first half of week 1 against Cleveland, that's the best half of football you've played all year. And you didn't even put the whole game together in reality because the second half you were outscored by the Browns. So, and what did we think after week 1? Oh, the Browns have one win. So what was that in reality? So we're looking at the Cowboys. The Cowboys need to take a deep look at Mike McCarthy. You can't fire anyone else, and you need to obviously make a change, especially after the bye if you don't go into San Francisco and win that game, because you'd sit at 3-4, and that's trouble. It doesn't matter at this point. At this point, mid-season, no, it's mid-season. I mean, basically, they're going to come back from a bye week. We're going to be in week 8. So we're going to be almost halfway through, right? So, I mean, listen, they're still 3-3. So it's not likely to fire him, obviously, because they're 3-3. But that will be that is something you need to start looking at. Niners, if we look at the schedule, Niners after the bye is 3-4. I don't know who they have after that, but they still need to play the Eagles twice. They still need to play the Redskins twice. And for you to be 0-3 at home, and the way you lost those 3 games, right? And people are going to say the Ravens game got tight. That was in the fourth quarter. The first 3 quarters, that game wasn't even close. I was there. I saw it. I saw people walking out to start that fourth quarter. and almost the entire row in front of me just completely took off.
So yeah, so
So,
they have the Niners coming up after the bye, and then they go to the Falcons, versus the Eagles, Texans, at the Commanders, Giants, Bengals, at the Panthers, Bucks, Eagles, and then they
so
finish
if
at the
if
Commanders.
we look at the next five, let's say just the next five. The next five is Niners, Falcons. So Niners are probably going to be leading the division or top of the division, near the top of the division. Atlanta's the top of the top of the division. The Eagles atop of the division or near the top 3-2. The Texans at top of the division, and the Commanders lead the East. So those are your next five games. How will you pan out in those next five games for them? And Dallas needs to take a really, really hard look at this. Why are we struggling at home? Is it all the bullshit commotion that goes on? My buddy was there. We flew out together. His brother came in, and on Saturday, day before the game, his brother with his friend, some VIP bullshit. They're at the practice facility watching these guys kind of do a walkthrough and this and that. Like there's fans there. That's also the same day Jerry Jones was caught with Jamie Foxx talking about these guys peckers. Like there's an issue in these home games. I mean, there's all sorts of shit going on, and I'm sure other teams do it, but I think there's too much on the field distractions at home for you to get your ass completely demolished like this. Like they're getting destroyed. It's not like, oh, the games were close. Fuck it, we're losing close games. No, it's pure dominance. I mean, today, and by the way, kudos to Dan Campbell because I'm big on these guys every week, and we see it in the NFL every week where teams have trouble closing. That game, I was referencing the game Ravens Cowboys. We go to that Ravens Cowboys game. It was 28-6 to start the fourth quarter. Game ends 28-25. The Cowboys at the end were one stop away from getting the ball back and potentially winning or tying the game. Dan Campbell came out of the second half and he said, we're going to put the fuck to you. And on the first drive, 3rd and 8, they threw a 39-yard touchdown pass. Dallas goes down. I think they got a field goal. And then Detroit gets another field goal. They get the ball back, get another touch. They're throwing. They were literally throwing. They're running trick plays. Like, I don't know if you saw Penei Sewell gets a statue. What's it called? The Statue of Liberty play, right? The pass to the receiver, toss back to the lineman coming around. Like, are you kidding? The disrespect that went out there today with Dan Campbell, but I liked it. And I didn't find it disrespectful. I find it put the fuck to the team. So in the fourth quarter, we're not worried about it. We're not worried about this, that. Look at the Broncos kicked in onside today to have a chance to get the ball back and drive the field to tie the game after being down 23-0 because teams let up. Good for Dan Campbell today not letting up. I think he did a phenomenal job. But Dallas 0-3 at home. Can't fire Jerry Jones. Jerry, what are you going to do? And I think Dallas' inability to run the ball, they average 82 yards on the ground. They're second to last in the league, only to the Jets, by the way, which is shocking. But we'll see the Jets tomorrow. They're the ones who fired their coach, and we'll see them kind of see how they do. But for
This is
Dallas,
the just to cut you off real quick. This is the play right here
yeah, there
that
it
they
is
pass
right
it to
there.
Sewell. So he throws it out to the receiver. Sewell comes around
Which
and
got called
freaking
back,
takes
by
it.
the way.
Oh, it got called back.
That play got called back for
Oh wow.
I believe ineligible man downfield. If you
You're
see,
right. You're absolutely right.
I think that's what the play was. I was watching it at a bar and I wasn't listening, but I think that's what it came back for. Yeah. But anyways, I mean, Dan Campbell was just out there, and so addressing Dallas, second worst in the league in rushing at 82 yards a game. You only went and got Zeke. I've said it for about 3 weeks now, and I told my buddy who's a diehard Dallas fan who lives in Dallas. I said, listen, the Falcons have two phenomenal running backs, right? And obviously, we know that's Bijan is the back. Why not go out and make a trade with Atlanta, who can in reality afford to give up Tyler Algier, and he can be your clear cut number one. We saw him be almost basically a number one guy with Algier. The Cowboys need a running game. You're not helping Dak when you had 13 rush attempts. I'm not sure how many rush attempts they had today, but at some point when I checked, I think they had like 7. So that's not helping Dak in the offense. That's not helping your defense stay on the sideline for a little bit. They're just getting right back out there, and they're just getting pummeled, especially at home. Like
Dallas
so,
rushed for total team 17 carries for 53 yards total.
And I think both of those carries, a lot of those carries came late. If we look at that bulk, I want to say that came late. I when I saw, I think at halftime they might have had 7 carries, but it wasn't very many yards. And you need to be able to run the ball just a little bit. I mean, look at the two teams at the bottom of the list: the Jets and the Cowboys. What are they? The Jets, I think, are 2-3, and Dallas is 3-3. So, I mean, you have to be able to run the ball a little bit. A little bit. Take pressure off of your quarterback. Take some pressure off of your defense. Especially when Micah's not playing, you have a bunch of injuries. Let's keep him on the sideline a little longer. And you didn't do that against the Saints, and you didn't do that against the Ravens, and you definitely didn't do it today. And so, I mean, we'll dive into this in a couple weeks when we see what they've done after the Niner game. But I think Dallas needs to take a hard look at what is going. Mike McCarthy for sure doesn't survive this year unless he gets the NFC title game. Like, there's no way he's surviving this year. But in my opinion, looking at their next 5 games, if they don't improve, I don't think he gets to week 12. To be honest with you, I'll tell you what, if they're completely out of the playoffs or 3 games out with 5 to go, they'll probably fire him then. Because I think you need to make a change if you're Dallas, and you can't fire the owner / GM, and he's the one that's basically got you in this problem. I believe that's my opinion. But Dallas, check. Don't hate me because I'm telling you the truth about your franchise right now. It is.
Oh yeah, the fans on TikTok are flaming you.
Oh, 100%. And that's fine. But you are a franchise that was good for a stretch there in the 90s and then 20 years before that. And that is it. Since then, you have been, this is not irrelevant to the league because you are the Cowboys. That's our Raider fans also. You are not irrelevant as far as a team, but as a title contender, you are always irrelevant. When we get down to the last 2 weeks of the playoffs, you are irrelevant when we get to those weeks. Cowboys, Raiders, yep, both of you are. And that is the sad truth, but it unfortunately is for these historic franchises. But that's what you guys are, historic. You haven't been good, or at least title contending good, for a while. And Cowboy fans, we did this. We were 13-3. We were blah, blah, blah. 11 Pro Bowlers and this and that. And what happened in the playoffs? And it always happens in the playoffs. One and done. You guys are one and done. And so, I mean, Mike McCarthy, I think he's the next one to go. But we will see. And that time will tell on that. So, now since we are talking about head coaches here, and we are talking about football, my next issue, and what I'm yapping about, and I'm very upset about, was watching the Utah Utes play on Friday night. And Kyle Whittingham, everybody loves to praise this man. And, he's so good, this, that. Why doesn't he to get a bigger job at a bigger program? Well, I think Utah was big enough for the Pac-12. They were the best team in the Pac-12 on and off for the last 3 or 4 seasons, maybe 5 on and off. Not as consistent as Oregon, but they were there. And not at Washington the last couple of years, but they were always there. They were always in the talk. When we've watched now them lose the last 2 games, they started 4-0. Cam Rising got hurt a little bit before that. When we've watched these last 2 games now, they played Arizona and Arizona State. The game 2 weeks ago against Arizona at home, and Cam Rising was not playing, obviously. Isaiah Wilson was I believe, the backup quarterback, and he did good enough to go on the road at Oklahoma State and win that game. And he won that game. And he managed to win games. So when you open the Arizona game, you drive the field 4th and 2, you don't take the points, fine. You know what? We're trying to get going early. We're fine. We're 4th and 2. All right. We're going to go for it. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But on the next drive, Arizona goes down, kicks a field goal, and now you get the ball again, and you're now 4th and goal again from the 2-yard line, and you don't score, and you don't get points. Now that becomes an issue. That game, you turned the ball over 4 times on downs. You scored 10 points. You lost that game 23-10 at home to an Arizona team that we thought was going to be better than what they were, and we've watched them get blown out now twice. Okay, so they've got their doors blown off of them twice. Utah should have won that game. So now this week, they're at Arizona State. Cam Rising is now in the game. He's starting this game. And Utah, in reality, if you look at Utah, they need this win, right? The way the Big 12 is going, we need to get this. Utah's got to have a mindset. We need to get this game. So the game's 20-16. It's 4th and 8, or 4th and goal from the 8. And you're down 20-16. They don't kick a field goal. They end up going for it. They don't get it. Okay. And so then they get the ball back. They get the ball right back. And now they they throw a touchdown, gets called back for offensive PI, and it was. So now you're forced to kick a field goal. They end up kicking a 45-yard field goal, which was further than the one they would have taken the first time, which the kicker ends up making. But I thought my first thought when I first saw it, maybe the kicker can't kick from 42 yards away. Because maybe because that's what it was. Actually, it was 4th and 8. I apologize. 4th and 8 from the 24. It wasn't 4th and 8 in goal. It was 4th and 8 from the 24, which makes it all the worse, by the way. So 4th and 8 from the 24, it would have been a 42-yard field goal attempt. He doesn't take it. They end up turning the ball over. They get 4 yards. They end up getting the ball back. That now they had to kick a field goal, and it turns into a 45-yarder, which the guy makes. So, and if you're watching this game, and I'm not a Utah fan, but if I'm watching this game, like, oh, maybe the kicker can't kick. Well, obviously he could kick because you just had him kick a 45-yarder. If you take both of those field goals, you are now up 1 in the game. Now Arizona State's looking a little bit different of how they're going to approach the game. You now have a lead. You are now putting pressure on them. Maybe that doesn't happen if you take that field goal, because in reality, the way they got the ball back was Arizona State went for it on 4th and 1 from their own 29, which was ridiculous as well, by the way. I think a lot of these coaches now, they're following these analytics so much that it looks ridiculous. You guys need to take the points. If we look at Dan Lanning last year, the game in Washington where he doesn't take the points, and he did it again yesterday. I mean, luckily he got away with it because he faced a worse coach than him. And if we go now to that game, I mean, Ryan Day, you have the penalty called on you there with 30 plus seconds. You don't call your timeout. The clock's ticking after that penalty, right? And Dan Lanning knew it, and now everyone's praising Dan Lanning because he told the refs and blah, blah, blah. Well, if you're a fucking college head coach, you should understand every fucking rule, right? So that's what you're paid to do, and you're paid mightily, these guys.
But
So
do you put that more on Ryan Day or Will Howard?
I put it on the head coach. The clock's ticking. They can all see it. It's not like Will Howard's the only one looking. By the way, if we go, let's fast forward just a little bit. The play with 6 seconds left, where I believe Oregon called the timeout right before that. Do you remember? Okay, so Oregon calls a timeout. If I call my guys over, I have one timeout in my hand. Ryan Day has a timeout. They're playing completely off of my receivers. So I'm coming here and I say, hey, listen, we're going to get a field goal here, obviously, because we're way too far. We need to attempt the field goal. You can easily get one of these, and they're giving these guys about a 10 or 12-yard cushion. Throw something quick, make sure the guy gets out of bounds, and if he doesn't get out of bounds, make sure if they end up tackling him, they're probably going to tackle him within 2 to 3 seconds. So you're probably going to go down with at least 1 or 2 seconds left to call a timeout, and then you have an attempt at least at a field goal. You didn't even get the attempt off, Ryan Day, and then you want to blame Will Howard. Like, I don't think it's Will Howard's fault. Like, when they run the play with 10 seconds, 4 seconds come off the clock, Oregon calls a timeout. At that moment right there, I already know what side my kicker likes to kick on. Does he prefer the left? Does he prefer the right? Does he want the middle? If he wants the middle, I throw it to my receiver. I make sure he gets down in the middle right away and leave me 2 seconds or a second to call a timeout. That is easy, because you needed to get a field goal attempt off at least, even if he misses it, at least you had an attempt. But you didn't have that. That is 100% coaching. And Ryan Day right there, he shit the bed, as we've seen many times. And you know what? And it's like I say, when Dave Roberts won the World Series in 2020, he faced a manager worse than him. Dan Lanning faced a coach yesterday worse than him, it seemed like. He doesn't win big games. As Dan Lanning now gets a big win, right, over Ryan Day. Because Ryan Day is just a little bit worse than Dan Lanning when it counts, obviously. And that to me was all on Ryan Day There is no doubt about it. People can say, "Oh, Will Howard, he's a 6-year quarterback or 5-year quarterback or whatever it is." Yes, and yes, the fault is for both. But Ryan Day is a head coach. He needs to make sure that his quarterback knows, hey, this is the play we're gonna run here, or they got to get in his ear. They need to understand it between Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, and Will Howard. They all needed to understand what the objective was with 6 seconds. The objective with 6 seconds was not to throw the ball down the field and pray for a Hail Mary. The objective was to get 8 to 10 yards to somehow get our kicker out there for a 50-yarder, a 48, a 52, whatever it was, but at least give us a chance to try and win it. You going down in the middle of the field, and I know what he was thinking. I'm going to get down and maybe I got with a second. But no, it wasn't that. You went down, started to go down with a second, which ended up with zeros on the clock, which was the right call by the refs, obviously. They didn't blow it. But I thought Dan Lanning outcoached Ryan Day, and Ryan Day just doesn't show anything. Some of these coaches, when I watch some of these games, you're like, how did these dudes get a fucking job? Like, seriously. And then people are going to say, oh, how did you get a podcast? Because I paid for it. That's why. I paid for it so we can do it. Like, and thank you for commenting, by the way. So, but at the end of the day, I mean, we need to really look. Some of these coaches, man, it's like they're in way over their head. Decision making. Lincoln Riley, that's the next one. So we look at that drive to end the game, and I think it's 30-30. And he's plenty of time, and he's got 3 timeouts. He let 30 seconds take off the clock there? Like what? And then you're gonna force your quarterback to run a 3rd down play with 14 seconds left. You still had 3 timeouts in the bag. What did I tell you before that play? We were watching the game together. I said, I have a feeling Miller Moss is gonna throw an interception. He throws an interception. Penn State gets the ball right back. Luckily, nothing came of it. That's exactly what I said. While we were watching the game yesterday, and that's exactly what I said. Because you have a quarterback. These guys are young. These guys are young. NFL quarterbacks have trouble with this. Not all, but they do, and they're a lot more experienced and older. This guy's a young player. He's in reality a 1st-year player. He's been there for 3 years or whatever, but this is a 1st-year player. Okay, and with you now, you putting that much pressure on him. Fuck, it's 14 seconds because that's what's going on in his head. His head. Well, Lincoln Riley's probably thinking, we're gonna push this to, we're gonna take it down with 14 seconds, 15 seconds. If we turn it over, fuck it, or we'll just punt it out and we'll go to overtime. But that should have never been the case because you were moving the ball. You should have. You had to win the game. You had you. What Lincoln Riley showed in that game yesterday was he had no confidence in Miller Moss. No confidence in that man to go down and win that game. And he would have done it if you would have given him the chance. He would have been able to do it. But you put him in a tough spot and you didn't believe in him. And instead of you upsetting the number 4 team in the land, you are now 1-3 in the Big Ten and showing that you don't belong as a head coach in the Big Ten. And I've said this for 2 years. I think you're overrated as an actual head coach, Lincoln Riley. I think you're a phenomenal offensive coordinator. I think you're phenomenal. I think if I had a school and you would be my offensive coordinator and Dion would be my recruiter, because neither of you could be a fucking head coach. And so you proved yesterday to Miller, in my eyes, you proved to Miller Moss that you didn't have faith in him to use those timeouts to put your team in a spot to win, and you cost the university a win that they should have had. USC should have beat Penn State yesterday and knock Penn State's chances of even being in the playoffs basically out because they're going to lose to Ohio State in a couple weeks. And you didn't do that. And now you pinned yourself completely out of the top, even 35 probably, and you're 1-3 in the Big Ten. And now everybody's yapping that those new schools that came from the Pac-12, with the exception of Oregon, are trash. And can we say otherwise? No, we can't. It's a fact at this point. Because what Washington, UCLA, and USC have done is basically embarrass the Pac-12 in the Big Ten. Well, Arizona State's 5-1. I mean, Arizona State's 5-1. Cal's competing in the ACC. I mean, the teams that have moved, USC, UCLA, and Washington are, I think, a bigger disappointment than Arizona than the other teams, I think, with the exception of Utah and Arizona. Utah and Arizona, I think, are very disappointing at this point. And Utah, I really believe that it's Whittingham the issue. With Arizona, you can see it. Fafita, he's dropping back, and this is not an exaggeration. If you watch Arizona play, Fafita has the one or two best receivers in the land, and it's not even close. Okay, and you guys can keep yapping about Travis Hunter all you want. Now, when you watch the game last night, you can clearly listen to the announcers talking about how good Travis is on the defensive side of the ball. He's not that good on the offensive side of the ball compared to T-Mac and Trey Harris. That's my opinion. That's also the opinions of a lot of other motherfuckers that don't want to say it. But anyways, that's for another day. But T-Mac, who's arguably one of the two or three best receivers, however you want to put it in college football, and Fafita, the guy's 5'7", 5'8" on a good day. He's dropping back, no exaggeration, 15 yards to be able to see down the field. And I mean, that's a shit show. At this point, I think last year they caught everyone by surprise. This year, there's no surprise. And we're gonna right. And now there's no surprise. Like now we just know what Arizona is. Like they've lost 3 games, and I think 2 of the 3 haven't even been close. Yeah, and then the ass whooping they caught from BYU this weekend, yesterday. But we'll see. College football is great right now, and it should be a treat. And we're getting a lot of talk. The SEC isn't what it was. Bama's struggling, Georgia's struggling, but Ole Miss is falling off the wagon. I mean, Lane looked last night. He was distraught. He looked like what the fuck. He was stunned. By the way, LSU led for 0 seconds of that game. They didn't lead at all ever. They walked it off. They didn't lead for 1 minute. And Brian Kelly somehow won that game for LSU. I cannot believe it.
I have a bit to pick with you. I
About
have a bit to pick with you, and I'm about to share my screen right now because I have an issue with this, and I want to preface this before. With I am not arguing for the Big Ten. I am a Pac-12 guy. I will never vouch for that conference. It is
okay.
top heavy right now.
Okay.
But this SEC, Rafa, this SEC, you're telling me that your premier teams, Alabama, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, are sitting in the middle of the Texas A&M
Well,
by wins is leading your conference. Rafa, you have to Vanderbilt and Arkansas are at the topper echelon of your conference right now. Vanderbilt.
Well, Vanderbilt's playing well. I'm not telling you they're that good. If we're looking at this, listen, A&M has always been a disappointment since Jimbo, right? And we've always thought as A&M as a disappointment. And I thought the same thing. I'll be honest with you. I haven't watched A&M play. I don't like LSU because I don't like the quarterback. Okay. I love their receivers always. Lacey's been there for a handful of years already. I like their receivers. I hate the head coach. I cannot stand Brian Kelly. So that's why I got a kind of LSU hate bias at this point, just because I hate Brian Kelly. But when we're looking at it, in reality, we know Texas is the number 1 team in the land. They look the best, right? So we're looking at it here. Georgia hasn't looked good. They didn't look good yesterday against Mississippi State, and a lonely Mississippi State team, the worst team in the conference, Mississippi State. Tennessee, I'm not a fan of because I don't love the quarterback. I don't like that type of quarterback. I don't want to offend anyone, but I don't like it. That's just that's just what it is. That's just what it is. I don't like that type of quarterback. To me, they're not very good, and you know who they are. All right, you know who they are. If it ain't Marcus Mariota, I don't want them. That's just what it is. All right. So I'm not a fan of the Volunteers. I don't like them. Arkansas, they played well at Oklahoma State on the road. They beat Tennessee. How good is Arkansas? We need to find out. I don't think they're very good. Like I said, Georgia hasn't played up to what they should usually play. LSU's look good. I mean, what can we say about LSU? They've looked good. I don't even know how. But they have. So, but this is early, right? This is early. Like if we look at the Big Ten, I think Indiana's in first place. Like this is early. We know Texas is the cream of the crop. That there is no doubt about that. But A&M, if you can pull up, so there's Oregon's schedule, who hasn't played anybody but now Ohio State. If you can pull up, CJ, the games coming up for A&M, and we can kind of go through it real quick and see what A&M's got. A&M has surprised me. I've never liked A&M because I thought they've always underachieved with Jimbo. So they got at Mississippi. So they got, look at this. Look at this. I mean, they're going to get Ellis. They could they could be if we're looking at this now. Let's give it let's give the props to Texas A&M for what they are right now. I mean, but let's look now. So they went to Florida and won. They beat Arkansas at home, which they've looked good. They annihilated Missouri, which we know they've looked like shit, with the exception of last week. So they're at home they're on the road this week at Mississippi State, which is the worst team in the conference. Then they get LSU at home, by the way, which is it's going to be a huge game, obviously. Oh, it's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be a great game, and that's going to be at home for A&M. Then they go to South Carolina, which is not a bad team, but very beatable for A&M. They get New Mexico State, which is their gimme win late. Then they get Auburn on the road. And
I think that's the sneaky one. I think that might be the sneaky one.
I think they have two sneaky ones. If they can get undefeated, if they can beat LSU, they stay undefeated, but they go to South Carolina. And we've seen South Carolina play well now. They had a lead against Bama. To be honest with you, Bama's doing a lot of that South Carolina could be a sneaky, a hangover game maybe. If they beat LSU. So but this could lead to a clash against Texas where both teams are undefeated. I mean,
imagine that, Rafa. The first SEC new is the Texas versus Texas A&M. They separated because Texas A&M went to the Big 12, and then now the rivalry is back, and boom, SEC championship.
I mean, it could be. It could be. Will it be? Probably not. But it could be. But it could be. And shout out to Texas A&M. They've done a great job. They've won the games that they've been put in front of them, and they've won. And they've won, and they've played well. And so I know it's shocking for everyone, and for A&M, and it is for me as well, because when I think of the SEC, at least preseason, I think Bama, Texas, Georgia, any which way you want to cut that, right? And then right after that, Ole Miss and Tennessee. I thought they were clearly the three best, and then the two that were right behind them. Now we've seen what Ole Miss and Tennessee have done. Ole Miss, I don't think even recovers from this to get back in the playoff race. Like, they need to win out, looking at their schedule. So I think Ole Miss is done. Lane just looks like the offense just doesn't look like what we expected Ole Miss offense to look like. You have the number one receiver in the land yards wise. You have you had a Heisman hopeful to start the season at quarterback, and you haven't looked good. The game against Kentucky that went right down, scored, and up 7-0 right away, and then just disappear for 50 minutes or something. So we'll look at Ole Miss here. Ole Miss they get Oklahoma this week coming up, or no, in 2 weeks. So they have a bye, and then they get Oklahoma. They go to Arkansas, which we know they've looked very good. They get Georgia at home. They go to Florida, and then they get Mississippi State. It's very possible for them to win out. I mean, but if they beat Georgia, what Georgia team are we going to have? Because Georgia plays Texas, I think, this week. So, or Georgia already has a loss. Do they beat Texas? I don't think so. So, and you could start crying now that there's probably going to be a team in the playoffs with 3 losses, and it could be Georgia or Ole Miss. I mean, people can start crying now.
There should be no team in the playoff with 3 fucking losses. There are too many good teams.
Do you want to address the playoff real quick? Let's look at it real quick. So let's look at the 11 since we're here. We'll look at the 11, and then we have the non-power, which is the non-power 4 team. I hope it's Navy. I don't think it's going to be Navy, but Boise's got a great chance. I would love it to be Army or Navy. That would be great. But we'll see. So 11 teams are going to make this playoff. As of right now, for me, the lock is Oregon for sure. Lock them in already with that win. I don't think they can. They maybe lose 1 game after this, but I don't think so. So I'd lock Oregon in for sure as a playoff spot, and Texas is pretty fucking close. I mean, they do have Georgia this week, and then they get an A&M at the end of the year. So we got to see, but I think there will be. So if we're looking here, okay, Texas. So we got Texas, Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, Alabama, LSU, Iowa State, who looks good, by the way, Clemson, Tennessee, and Notre Dame. So Notre Dame. Now remember, we got to do a non-power 4, which would then be, let's just hold it as Boise for now, right? So if we're looking at these teams, and this is your top 25, we'll look at the first 11. I think Oregon's in. I think Texas still has a tough game with Georgia, and I don't remember who else they have, but I know they have Georgia and Texas A&M for sure. Okay, I think Oregon, no matter what's in right now. Like I don't know if you want to look at their schedule. I don't know if they can lose a game without it being in the Big Ten title game. I'm not too familiar with their schedule, but here we go. So they got Purdue, that's a win. Then they get Illinois at home, at Michigan, Maryland, Wisconsin, and Washington. Yeah, they're probably going to go undefeated. I mean, Michigan's quarterback can't throw. Can Michigan be physical enough to beat Oregon? Yes, they can. But can their quarterback score any points? But this is the thing with Michigan. I'll tell you right now. And that's weeks away. Michigan can run the ball, and they're diehard to run the ball as Boise was, and Oregon squeaked out that game at home. This game is going to be in the big house for Oregon. I think that's going to be a trap game for Oregon, that Michigan game. But for me, Oregon is in the playoff already. So that's the one thing. That's the one team I think. But if I'm looking at it right now, do you agree with the top 11 teams? I say no. Looking at the 11 right now, because we're going to just take the top 11. I pull Tennessee, and I give BYU the 11th spot. That's just me right now.
So yeah, I
take
agree
the other
with
10.
My disagreement is really with and this is me being honest. I think Alabama is too high. I think Iowa State, as well as they have played, are too high, and I think Tennessee right now is too high. I like BYU a little higher. I like Texas A&M a little higher. I like Boise State and Indiana and Kansas State. I think that group right there from BYU to Kansas State should be way uplifted.
Now let me ask you something. We're taking just the first 11 here. Boise's in. We're doing the playoff tonight, right? October 13th, 2024. We're doing your yapping playoffs. Texas right now is the number 1 seed according to them. We're just going off of the top 11 rankings, and we're going to put Boise in that non-power 4 spot right now, right? So you have Texas at 1. Let's just say we flop that. We put Oregon at 1, Texas at 2, and then we need the Big 12 winner, which would be Iowa State as of right now, right? So we'd be looking at, and here we go: Oregon number 1, Texas number 2, Miami number 3, and Iowa State number 4. Then your playoff teams from there. We're talking about Penn State, Ohio State, Georgia. You think you would remove, what you're telling me is you would remove Alabama as a playoff team right now and put in Texas A&M. Texas A&M has 1 loss.
But they have proven that at the end of the day, we have to look at who's on their schedule. And they played Missouri when they were top 10, and they lost to Notre Dame when they were top 10. But at the end of the day, they have a top 10 win. And Alabama,
Georgia has a top 2 win. Alabama's
right.
a top 2 win. They beat Georgia.
Right, but they just have looked bad on multiple weeks.
They've looked bad 3 games, and they've looked bad 3 games and the fourth and the second half of Georgia. I agree with you. I think they've looked bad against Vanderbilt. They look bad this week.
If I'm gonna go ahead and have a hot take, I'm taking Texas A&M versus Bama on a neutral field right now.
Ooh, that is a bold statement, sir. But hey, it's October. It's October 13th. We got plenty of time, so we're doing it today. For me,
so finish.
I'm okay.
So you have Oregon at number 1, Texas
at Oregon
2.
at number 1, Texas at number 2. If you want to make a graph after this, it would be fucking awesome, right? So I got Texas at number 1. I got Oregon at number 2. I'm going to put Miami at number 3 because we have to put in the conference winners, right? So keep that in mind. And then I'm going to take Iowa State, which is the undefeated Big 12 team still, and they're ranked at number 9. I will take Iowa State as the 4. Okay. So now at number 5, then at 5, I take Penn State at 5, Ohio State at 6, Georgia at 7, Alabama at 8, LSU at 9, Clemson at 10, BYU at 11, and Boise State at 12. And I watched BYU last night. We saw it. You saw it with me. I think BYU's quarterback looks really good. I'm not saying he's Milroe. I'm not saying he's any of those guys, Quinn Ewers, any of those guys that people believe that are Heisman guys and all that. He looks good to win the Big 12 and keep it going. That's what I think he looks good enough to do that.
You
I
ran
don't.
you ran through that kind of fast. You said Oregon 1, Texas 2, Miami 3, Iowa State 4, Penn State 5. I missed 6 and 8.
Okay, so Penn State 5, Ohio State 6, Georgia 7, Alabama 8, LSU 9, Clemson 10, BYU 11, and Boise 12.
Imagine that fucking playoff. That's
Well,
awesome.
you'd have the front four, and then so you'd have a matchup just by what I'm doing. You'd have Penn State hosting Boise, right, which would be the 5-12, and then you'd have Ohio State at the 6, and they would be hosting 11, which would be BYU, and then you'd have a Bama Clemson matchup at the 7-10, and in the 8-9 you'd have an LSU or no, you'd have an LSU Clemson, and you'd have a BYU Bama. I mean, you'd have that's that we're doing that. It's early. It's October 13th. We're just throwing it out there, but we're gonna do it every week. We want to do it every week and see how we do and see how close we keep it. But hey, Kansas State's got plenty of time to move up as well. If we're looking at the bottom, Indiana's still undefeated. I mean, it's so good. College football right now is so good. I mean, the product out there, and what is it about the teams, the bigger teams, the Alabamas, the Georgias, kind of struggling? Even Ohio State, we saw them struggle a little bit. We saw Oregon struggle before the Oregon State game, and then this week, is
There's an
it that
answer.
what's the answer?
There's 12 spots to
That's
win
what
that gold.
That's what I thought. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking these guys, they're not it's not as important to go undefeated as it was previously. And I really believe that's what these schools are looking at. Like, hey, you know what, we can get away with listen, nobody wants to go out there and lose. Don't get me twisted and like, oh, this guy's a fucking idiot. And I probably am, but it's not that they want to lose. It's just that maybe there's a lack of focus there. And there's a little bit more wiggle room. And since you
I
have
think, yeah,
go ahead.
so I sorry to cut you off, but so Joel, so this was the biggest like talking point against expanding from people like Joe Klatt was there it would diminish the meaning of regular season games, but it has really done the opposite of that. Like we have seen upsets and excitement like crazy, and I think as you're saying, like players are not playing as hard and teams are not playing as hard. Yeah, they're not playing as hard, but they are forgetting that there are a lot of teams that are better than they were last year, and there are a lot of teams that want to buy in to try to get that national championship spot. So you're looking at teams like Alabama and Ole Miss and Tennessee, who if they lose one more game, their conference is too competitive; they won't make it.
I believe I see. Listen, I understand what you're saying because you're saying that their conference is too competitive. I don't know if the conference standings is going to determine how high a team gets ranked. Like I don't think Alabama can afford to lose a game again, but I don't know who they have left. Who can they lose to? Ole Miss can't afford to lose, obviously, because they have 2 losses. Georgia, they have a game coming up against Texas here. If
So
Georgia
Alabama,
loses,
to answer your question, at Tennessee versus Missouri at LSU back to back to back to back.
so all right, so the next 3 games for Bama, this is gonna have these 3 games right here is gonna Kellen DeBoer is gonna have to prove that he deserved that job. I have been adamant from the beginning, and you know it. On our Two Nobodies podcast with Eddie and myself, I've been at since this hire came up. Since he was hired, I did not like the hire. I did not think he was a big time program coach. He went to a national title, fine. You know how I feel about the Pac-12. I didn't think they were very good, and they always struggled defensively with Washington. Washington always struggled defensively. This team, they at one point, the point yesterday when it's 14-0, it's 4th and 9, and Bama scores that touchdown, guys wide open. Do you know what Bama's defense was leading up to that play on 4th down? They had given up 12 of 16 first downs or touchdowns on 4th downs. That is the worst 4th down percentage in all the entire nation. And you're Alabama. So that is not allowed at Alabama, and it should not. And Alabama will realize sooner rather than later that this was the wrong hire. They needed a big time guy. If they couldn't get a big time guy, I would have hired the defensive coordinator on the team or whoever the fuck was next there and said, "Hey, fuck it. If I lose with this guy, fuck it, I'm going to lose with this guy. But to me, DeBoer is in way over his head, and we'll see in the next 3 weeks. If he can win those 3 games, which he needs to, because I don't think he can't afford a loss to Tennessee. That's 100% for sure. He cannot afford a loss to Tennessee or Missouri. So LSU game, that's a little different, right? But even then, he can't afford. If he loses to LSU and LSU still undefeated when they or still with 1 loss when they get there, that might be different. And so, but we'll see. And the other thing, by the way, that kicks me, since real quick, some of these people that are watching college football, like, do you actually watch the games, or do you just throw shit like out there and see if it sticks on the window? Like, just throw shit up and see what happens. Like, for you to say, well, USC beat LSU, so that makes LSU shit, or every team that LSU, oh, because USC beat them, USC, oh, but dude, it's a week to week type of deal here. If you can't see the improvement LSU has made from week 1 to today, you are delusional. That USC wins means nothing now, because USC has 3 losses since that win. Okay, and one of the games they should have won, and people feel they
should have won all 3.
Well, the Michigan game, they got manhandled for 40 minutes. So, but they should have won the Penn State game and at Minnesota. But listen, just because one team beats another and then that team goes on to lose to this guy or beat this guy and blah 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 blah, it doesn't work like that. Like, that shit does not work. This is not the BCS anymore. Like, that shit does not. Oh, this team beat that team, so that team's better than this one. That shit doesn't work. So please don't mention that, because it makes you sound stupid. And you know who you are. It's a couple of you. A handful of you, actually, motherfuckers. It just sounds stupid. So nobody cares that Vanderbilt beat Bama, and Kentucky beat Georgia, or almost beat Georgia, and Vanderbilt beat Kentucky, so it makes Vanderbilt better than Georgia. No. Vanderbilt is not better than Georgia, and USC is not better than fucking LSU or Ole Miss. So no. No, it's not. So stop. That's it. Let's go on to the next fucking thing. What else we yapping about?
You got something to say to some comedians about Jordan and...
Man, so listen, I texted you the other day, I think it was on Friday, and I was having a conversation with my dad, and my dad doesn't watch sports. Like, he's hardest working motherfucker I know, that's for sure. He doesn't watch sports. He used to watch sports. So we're talking about something that has nothing to do with sports. And then he says something like, oh, yeah, it's because old shit, and, the old things is different. That's why, like, people think that LeBron's better than Jordan. And I said, whoa, he is. And he said, no, he's not. And he starts going on and on. And then as I'm going through the conversation with him, and he's fucking, just going at it, I realize, and then he says to me, well, it's not a question about that LeBron's better than him on the basketball court. Jordan was more iconic. Jordan was the first one to do this. And I said, but you understand, I understand all of that. I understand that Jordan is an icon, and he will be the most iconic basketball player to ever live. Like, we know that. It's like when people understand that Babe Ruth, although nobody alive ever saw him play, is the most iconic baseball player of all time. Pelé, for the most part, is probably the most iconic soccer football player to ever play. Like, there's no denying that. They're icons, fine. But for you to sit here and tell me that on the basketball court or on the soccer field, that Messi's not better than Pelé, or that LeBron is not better than Michael Jordan is ludicrous. Okay. And I understand Jordan was the first one, that his fadeaway was beautiful. Yeah, Wilt, in reality, if you look it up, was the first one to ever shoot a fadeaway, right? But it didn't matter because Wilt didn't play against any black guys, right? So when we actually get down to it, I'm like, wow, this fucking old dude, and then he called me 3 different times to break this shit down with his heavy accent. Like, oh, Pop, and I'm like, listen, dude, I understand he better. This is exact words. I understand he better in the basketball court.
But who is this, though?
This is my dad. So he said, this is what he said, I understand he better on the basketball court, but not in the world of basketball. I understand not in the world of basketball. So I'm looking through Instagram, and I see this video of Magic Johnson, 91 finals. By the way, no Kareem on this 91 Lakers team. It was Vlade Divac and injured James Worthy and maybe Eldon Campbell, right? So a bunch of fucking nobodies at that point. And Magic already had AIDS in his ass, we know for sure. He hadn't said it, but we know it. And so Magic's just Jordan cooking Jordan. I mean, baby sky hook, fucking turn around left hander off the glass. I mean, he's cooking them. And I send it to a very famous comedian, Aries Spears, who I love. I love his impressions. Tony Soprano when he does the Charles Barkley, when he does the Shaq, it's like he's fucking phenomenal, right? Yeah, the famous songs, Kobe Bryant, like all his shit is great, right? And so I watch his podcast. I think he's funny as fuck. So I send him this, and I said, "Here's your boy." But all you guys talk about is him being 6-0. And he sends me back, by the way, and Aries Spears is famous, and I'm an idiot. I'm not famous. And so, but I'm calling out Aries and my dad, another non-famous person. But so Aries replies and he says something like, he said something funny, and then he says, it's about, he says, besides being 6-0, and he starts going on about longevity. Well, LeBron's got that. He goes on about making your teammates better. Well, LeBron definitely does that. So every intangible that he listed for Jordan, LeBron does all of them and better. But he also says Jordan was the first to do it. Jordan is more iconic and what he did for the game. And listen, there's no doubt about what Jordan did for the game, but also what Magic and Larry Bird did for the game right before Michael Jordan. Like that was the biggest thing before Jordan. And so when you can sit here and say, yeah, Jordan was the first one to do things in the air that we didn't see. Yes, he was the first one to do that. But now if you watch the NBA on a nightly basis like I do, and you can see that guys, it doesn't have to be LeBron James or Kevin Durant or James Harden or Paul George or any of those guys for you to see certain things that if you saw it 30 years ago, you're like, wow. And now it's just on a nightly basis. So for you to be stuck on Michael Jordan was this iconic player, that's what makes him the greatest. I'm not talking about Michael Jordan being the greatest or most iconic player in NBA history. I'm talking about being the greatest player on the court with a basketball. And if you don't believe that LeBron James going to 8 NBA finals in a row, by the way, okay, and doing different things on the court, like he's not, people say, oh, it's the longevity stat, and we go through this all the time. Yes, longevity. It's 20 years in a row of being an all-star, okay? Like if we look at Michael Jordan's last 2 years with the Wizards, he was an all-star. One of the years was like, okay, yeah, let's make him an all-star. But we know he shouldn't have been. He averaged 20 points a game the last 2 years, or 21 points a game. LeBron doesn't average less than 25 at this point, and we're going on season number 22. So longevity should be part of the greatness. Aries Spears wanted to use it against me with Jordan. Oh, his longevity of greatness. Who's greater than LeBron for this long? Nobody. Nobody can even come close in any sport. We're talking about 20 years. We're talking about 20 years of being an all NBA player and an all-star. Not only an all-star, an all NBA team player for 20 straight seasons. Okay, he's just not showing up and going through the motions. He's an all NBA player. You want to throw away all-stars because it's a voting thing, fine. But we know it's bullshit. So certain things that you guys believe and you're stuck in that era because you had one TV with 15 channels. And the one channel they show you on Sunday afternoon, the NBA on NBC, was Michael Jordan against Isaiah, or not even Isaiah, because when Jordan actually started beating Isaiah, the Isaiah team was just terrible. They couldn't even put him on television anymore. But you saw him beating Reggie Miller in the Pacers. I had another guy tell me, when LeBron was in the East, it was weak. It was so weak that the East traded for Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors, and they won the title the next year. That's how weak it was. That's how good LeBron James was. When LeBron goes to the West starts making moves and becomes ultimately better. So the idea of Michael Jordan being this great player, he's great, phenomenal. He's the most iconic. But on the basketball court, 11,000 assists, 40,000 points. One guy had 5,500 assists, 32 or 33,000 points. Do you see the difference? The rebounds aren't even close. The blocks aren't even close. The shooting percentage is not too close. The three-pointers made, the percentage of three-pointers, the shooting percentage from three, it's not close. Jordan was a better free throw shooter, and he was maybe better from 17 feet away. But from behind that three-point line, he was not. Yes, old people, old heads, he's your icon. He's your god because you watched him play and that was it. And that's all you can imagine. Watch LeBron on any given night. He's usually the best player on the court at 40 plus years old. That is the difference. Forget your icon era when you only had 15 channels and that's all you were able to watch. Watch the other games. You'll be able to see it. One day, Michael Jordan's going to admit that LeBron James was best to ever play. And I hope one day you guys all acknowledge that shit. But if you like our content, please make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Check us out on all our social platforms and anywhere you can find your podcasts.